Welcome back everybody. Today we're going to take a look at Entity Framework Core and the Models project. So we'll basically be adding two more projects. Before that, what I want to do is take care of an error that I noticed I didn't change everything when updating the name of the store video upload. So today we'll first address that issue. And yeah, the primary reason why that occurred, because we have the video upload model and currently we have this one component sort of connecting to the Vuex store, and if you pay attention to the camera, you can see it's a little bit, it's transparent. You see I'm a ghost, so in case the code goes behind me, you can still see it. But anyway, so this component is the only component that we aim to talk with the video upload Vuex store, and we changed everything here. However, there was a dependency somewhere else, right? So that's basically breaking convention. Errors can occur there. So we're basically, we're breaking convention. Let's go ahead and fix that. So what we want to do, we want to go to the layouts and we want to open the default layout. And here where we have the depressed button, let's go ahead, comment this out. And what we'll do is we'll put this button inside the video upload, okay? So actually, no need to comment it out. Let's just go ahead and Control X will cut it. Control Home, go all the way to the top here, and here where we have the V dialog, let's paste it here. And if you pay attention to the previous example that we copied this from, we're gonna go back to the docs here for the V dialog, right? And this is part of the slots, right? So we can have an activator slot, and essentially you can put in a component into here that will be responsible for toggling your dialog, okay? And for us, we just want it to be a button, right? So let's just go ahead and just copy the name of this, and it's really simple what we're going to do. We don't need this on and value stuff that's gonna get passed into this slot. We just want the template. Let's go ahead, put our button in this template. We'll tab this. Okay, and for now what you should see is the button shouldn't appear just yet, okay? What we really want is we want to specify the slot, right? And you get a little bit of IntelliSense there. We just specify the slot, we specify what buttons in there, and toggle activity. We have toggle activity in this component. If I refresh this, yeah, the button is there, right? And it still works. So one thing is still going back to the default. Let's go ahead and remove Vuex from here, and let's go ahead remove the methods as well. Okay, let's go ahead, remove that space, keep it clean. Okay, so now that that's sorted out, we will kind of ping back and forth because it's hard to cover what exactly we're missing for the video uploads without knowing what we need on the back end. It's a lot of stuff to keep in your head, so just bear with me as we're gonna ping back and forth and map out the flow of the video upload. All right. So let's go ahead, collapse the web client because we're not going to touch it for a bit. What I want to do is I want to add a new project. We'll just call it class library.NET Core v2.1. And again, just call it tricking library and entities, or rather, let's call it models. I think there is no particular reason for naming it models instead of entities. I just feel more comfortable with it, so that's my only reason for doing that. Okay. Next, I want another class library. This is going to be the database layer. So tricking library.data. Okay. So the reason for naming it data is because, so let me delete these two classes. I'm gonna put everything relating to data storage. So naming it database is assuming that we are only gonna use this layer for storing stuff in the database. I want this to be a little bit more agnostic in that sense. So if we need other storage like Elastic maybe, or some caching provider like Redis or Memcache, or anything else that's storage related, I want to be able to stick it in there, and that will be the data access layer, right? So data is somewhere, we want to be able to access it. Okay, so the trick store, it served us nice, however we will have to get rid of it. Okay, sorry man, it has to be that way. Let's go ahead, Control X the trick. I will navigate to tricking library models, and I will put this here, right? So video will no longer reside here. What we want to do is we want to have a class submission, and the actual submission will have the, what's it called, the video. The trick will be kind of the main bucket. So the person that's going to be creating the trick isn't necessarily putting out his video to be the main video of that trick. He's putting out his submission on there to be the first submission. And then people can do various things with submission, like comment and discuss, etc. Let's put a little, let's allow them to give a little description here. Okay. So if they want to put any description here, they can. For the trick, there's a lot of stuff that we can put in the trick. Okay, I'm not going to be touching that yet. I want this to be more or less simple. The submission also relates to a particular trick, right? So it's a one-to-many relationship. One trick can have many submissions, right? So we will go ahead and put a int trick ID on here. Okay. Let's go ahead and to actually extract this. So Alt Enter and move to submission, matching in files. Yep. And yeah, so extract it from the file into its own file. Next thing, into the database. So I'm gonna go ahead and search for NuGet. So here I will be able to select all the NuGet packages. And what I want to search for is entity framework core. Okay. So I'm going to be adding a database. So what I need is a Microsoft Entity Framework Core. I'm going to be adding that to the data access layer. Let's go ahead and install that. And for now, I'm not going to be involving a database. I don't need that. All I want to do is get the in-memory provider. Let's go ahead and bring that in. So once I have those two things, let's go ahead and introduce our DB context, right? Standard stuff, probably seen me do this a gazillion times. So we have the appdb context. Maybe it should turn it into identity yet. Maybe we'll use identity server later on. We'll see. Maybe we'll just use I don't know, Azure identity provider or Google whatever. So the main thing, a standard creation of this goes, we want DB context options for this particular appdb context. And the options, we pass them to the base class to make sure everything's initialized correctly. There's nothing more to this other than actually adding your trick and submission to be tables. So the way that you represent your object as tables in the database is you create a DB set, right? And we'll just say trick. We will add a reference to this and we'll say tricks. Okay. Copy this, replace trick with submission and submissions on the second one, and voila, right? Simple appdb context and not much more is needed. Now we can more or less interface with it. Let's go ahead, go into startup, and here the singleton, unfortunately, it will no longer be here. Let's go ahead and make sure that I have a reference to my data access layer. And here we can add the DB context, appdb context. Okay. Options. On my options, I want to add in memory. Did the in-memory database get added? Yep. Maybe it's not add, but rather use in-memory database. Yep, there it is. Let's go ahead and say database, or we can call it dev. We can call it whatever, it doesn't really matter. What we want to do now, and this is a keyboard shortcut that I know in a writer, it's basically next error, right? So I think I already covered this one. I'm just going to go ahead and jump to the next error. We no longer have the tricky store. We do want to grab our appdb context. And for now, if you're wondering why am I putting my appdb context into the controller, isn't it bad practice? Like, don't worry so much about this. There is not enough logic here to justify heavy abstraction layers and separation of concerns, okay? We can go ahead and just go with the most simplest approach. One thing that I want to do here is actually get rid of this OK bit now. So for the tricks, let's go ahead and just return a enumerable of trick, right? And well, not navigate, but rather bring in the import. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna directly reference the appdb context, right? So in here we'll have tricks. We'll to list this. Next thing, we will just have a trick where we will say tricks first or default id equals id. Next thing, we can actually do this one because this is rather simple. So here we're going to be getting an enumerable of submissions, right? So a list of submissions where ID, it's probably better to name it trick ID for clarity. And what we're going to return here is I'm going to drop this down to a new line. Again, we can remove this context. We can go to submissions and we can say where, and we'll say trick ID equals trick ID, and then to list this, to execute this, right? If you're feeling uneasy with this being on one line, you can always drop it down like, I don't know, something like this, right? I don't mind it being there. It seems like an okay one-liner as long as it's not bleeding like that past the screen, right? Because some of you won't be able to see it. So yeah, next thing, trick, creating a trick. So creating a trick will be a little bit more involved. When we create a trick, we also want a submission in the package. So for now, what we'll do is we'll just say create the trick on its own, and this will be part of the streamlining process. So here we'll just say context, and then we will await context save changes async, right? So if anybody is wondering why do you want to use save changes async instead of save changes, the reason for using save changes async is because our application sits here, right? And the database is going to be here outside of our application, right? And what's going to happen is if you are using asynchronous, your application basically tells save changes, but it doesn't sit there and wait for the database to work and save the changes. It basically goes save changes and tell me when you're done, and then comes back and keeps working. If you don't use await, it will basically sit there and wait for the database to be finished, and your application gets blocked, okay? So you don't want to do this. The thing that we're going to return from here is a trick, so I think it's better to return the thing that you're creating, right? So you've created something, you want to give back what you've created because anything can happen in between here. But pretty much same story here. So one big thing here is to just basically say, right, does the trick have an ID, right? Because what's it called? Let's say 0. Sorry, I'll just type this out first and then start talking, and then we'll return null for now, obviously. So one thing, yeah, if you're updating, just make sure you put a check that it is indeed a trick that's trying to be updated to prevent all sorts of errors, okay? And deletion, right? So deletion is a heavy topic, right? You're basically removing data. You are erasing facts. Imagine if the government did something shady, right? And then they didn't want anybody to know that that ever happened. So they go ahead, change the books, right? Read 1986 or 1984, whatever the book is about, George Orwell's book about communism and stuff like that, right? So I don't like deleting stuff, so instead what I prefer to have is kind of like invalidation or deactivation sort of thing. So a trick, we hide it, we do not delete it, okay? So let's go ahead and say that is this deleted, all right? From the get-go, it's gonna be false. So going back to the tricks controller, we want to go ahead and get our trick, so let's go ahead and just copy the command that we have here. Right, and then what we want to do is say deleted true, and then we just want to save our changes async, and then just return OK. Await, yeah, make this asynchronous, and pretty much there we go. I'm gonna delete the comments on the routes here. I think that's pretty much more or less self-explanatory. One thing, okay, so one thing, oh, okay, there's like a mistake here, essentially. You can see that we have a collision in routes, so this is me missing out on the convention. What we want to do is we want to say submissions, because this is going to be a list of submissions, right? So get, and rather let's say list submissions for trick. Okay, so now that that's done, let's go ahead and do the same but for our submissions. Okay, so we can go ahead and just copy the controller. I'm gonna rename it to submissions controller. I'm gonna say okay, and let's go ahead. I will just copy basically I'm pretty sure I mentioned this before, but the way I copy or try to rename stuff is I go to my solution explorer, I open it up, I F12 to rename, I grab the name from here, and that's just an easy way to go and grab the name, and then I can say babush babash, right? For here, we're gonna use submissions. Let's go ahead, copy the name. I don't trust my spelling. We can then pick this, see the stuff that we want to use, okay? This is no longer going to be here. Listing all submissions, let's go ahead and say Ctrl-Shift-Alt-J, select all occurrences. In Writer, I don't know what it is in your ID, maybe you're gonna have to see what's gonna work for you, right? So let's go ahead and say submission, and don't use tab like me just there, use enter, okay? Because if you use tab, it's gonna replace everything in front of you. Enter actually like fills it out, okay? Okay, so looks like we got a couple of things. I've completely broke the namespace. Let's go back here, grab the namespace again. Let's fix it up, jump to the next error, and import all references, okay? At this point, it should be more or less done. You can see that the functionality is pretty much the same. So another thing that we can do is you can see that we don't want to delete submissions as well. Again, we just want to invalidate them. Let's go ahead and create a class, and we'll call it base model, okay? For the base model, what I want to do is I want to say that, right, you know this ID and deleted that we have? Let's go ahead, stick it here, and we will make this an abstract class, okay? Everything can be this essentially. So let's go ahead, delete this on the submission. And base model, trick is our base model as well, okay? And now if we go to the submissions controller, instead of trick here, what we want to do is, again, I'll just select all occurrences, or I'm pressing the wrong button there. And let's just double check that it hasn't selected anything up here. What I'm gonna do is, again, I'm just gonna say submission, right? And that works nice. Let's see what this says. Null. Okay, so it's basically warning me that this can potentially be null. If it is null, we can just say if null, return not found. Right, nothing there. 404. And you can see, since all of these functions are pretty much the same later on, if we keep running into the scenario where all of the functions between controllers are more or less shared and there is no complex logic, we can just extract that all into a base controller, and voila, right? Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? One thing to do, one of my favorite things in Writer, right, is you just open up the trick. So let's go ahead and go to the trick. You can see this invalid namespace. We just, again, Alt Enter, move to relative namespace, and adjust namespaces in solution. And it's going to check your whole solution and fix all namespaces there, so it will correspond to the file that they're in, okay? Another thing, again, if you are wondering, I don't know if you've been wondering before, I didn't address this before, but essentially, if you're wondering about, like, where are view models, man? Aren't there supposed to be view models? Are we doing clean design? Like, there is no requirement for having view models yet, okay? Once we run into a scenario where we need a view model, we will do it, okay? For now, I think this is more or less it. Let's go ahead and open up the console. So my Nuxt application was running. This one, I'm just gonna restart it, because when adding packages and dependencies, so just crashes anyway, so I'm just gonna rerun this. Okay, now this is more about basically lining up our Nuxt application with the tricks controller. So let's go ahead, collapse this stuff, and we'll go to the web client, and we'll just take a look at this component that we're working on. And the first thing that I want to cover is the trick submission, right? So we get to pick if it's either a trick or a submission. We upload the video and then the submission, and the submission cannot exist without a trick. So what I want to do is I want to let them fill the trick out first and then proceed, right? So we want to kind of like, you know, swoop in a extra step. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give a little form here for the trick. I'm gonna increase the amount of steps that we got here. Okay, this form is gonna go here. Okay, and for the submission description, yeah, I think that will be all right. Let's go ahead and we'll just say submission for now because it's not of great importance just yet. So save submission, save trick name. That's good. So for the set type, let's go ahead and check it out. And this is the part, right? So what we want to check is if the type equals upload type trick. We just want to do one increment. Okay, and let's make sure that the types are super equal. Otherwise, else if type equals upload type submission, we want to skip that step, right? And state step plus equals 2. So let's go ahead and check this out. We go here, trick, something's broken. Let's check it out. Bunch of errors there. Looks like the activator slotted bound. I don't think actually that we want the activator. Let's go back to the video uploads and let's just try default. I think that will be fine for us. So give this a refresh. I feel like no, that was a disaster. Let's get this back and we'll just say on here. Let's do what it asks us to. Give this another refresh. Upload this. Okay, trick submission. So neither are working. That's okay. Let's go ahead and check this out. So we do set a type that is a mutation. The weirdest thing is that we do not get an error, and let's say map state, we have the step and the step is bound. Let's go ahead and add another divider. Maybe it's because these don't line up. I'm not exactly sure why this isn't working. Let's go ahead, say 4, 5, and we'll say trick information, submission information. And one thing I will say is just VF, and what I want to do is expose the type on here. So wherever I map the state in the video uploads, where I have the type, let's go ahead and surface it here. Okay, so type. And what I want to do is I want to check against this upload type, and this doesn't look correct. I must have been tired when I wrote that. That looks a little bit better. Let's make sure that the type equals upload type dot trick, right? So this will only appear if we have this condition. And this one as well. Okay, let's go ahead back here. Let's give this a hard refresh, so Control F5. Upload. So yeah, still nothing. Let's go ahead and check the store if the events are happening. So trick events are happening. These are here, and as we can see, the type is being set to undefined. So that is okay. That just means that our computer property is messed up. So let's go ahead to the up bar, to the video upload, and video upload actually will just do fine. So upload type submission, that looks fine to me. Let's go ahead and just make sure. Okay, so I get it. So you can see here that we are essentially deconstructing the type. So this is just my bad. Let's go ahead and make sure that we assign the type here. Okay, so save that. Let's go back. Let's try this again. And nice. So we do end up on the next step. Now let's go ahead and close this and see if we skip this with a submission. And one thing is with the numbers, right? So we essentially have 1, 3, 4, 5, and the second one is hidden, right? So this is something that we will work on, but essentially not now, not yet. Patient, right? So the first thing to go through is this save trick. So what I don't want to do anymore is post the trick straight away. We're going to use atomic transactions with Axios, right? It's just a fancy word that, or batch transactions, or batch request, right? We're just going to put 2 requests together and send them together, okay? So instead of save trick, I'm just going to go ahead and preserve the form. What I will do is, let's just check the store, because I just want to essentially increment by 1. And we will just say inc step. Okay. For something like this, we don't need anything passing in. We can just say set state step plus plus. Okay. There can be stuff there like model validation, etc. Just not yet. All right. Inc step. Put this on the mutations. Inc for increment in case you are wondering. And we'll put this right here, right? So right here, our form will be saved. Okay, if we abort after the video upload, video is something that we can delete, although again not preferable. We can then submit this information, have a review section, and this is where we essentially say save. All right, so let's go ahead and say inc step here as well. So we increment the step, we get to the file upload. Let's go ahead and see handle file upload, start video upload. Let's go ahead and check it out. We set the task, we increment the step, we'll end up on the submission form. We increment the step, we end up on the review form. Okay, so this is the part where we can actually go ahead and save the trick, or rather, let's go ahead and just say call it save, right? Because we're no longer really saving a trick. It's either a submission or a trick, so I think calling it save will be fine. Let's go ahead down here and call this save. Okay, so at this point, this can fail for all sorts of reasons, but we're not concerned with this yet. We essentially get the video. The video, as I've discussed before, is part of a submission now. So let's take it out of here. Let's go ahead and add a submission. This will be a new object. In here, we will have a description for the submission, right? So description, and yeah, that's gonna be going out of bounds. Let's go ahead and drop this down here so everyone can see. Description, this submission. Don't trust my spelling, that's why I'm looking for helps there. Let's go ahead and just check the form again. Video and description, right? So let's go ahead and put the video on here as well. And by the way, if you don't know, if you just put, if the name is the same, you can just put the property on there and then it will inherit the name. If you need a new name, you specify a new name, okay? So formatting this, again, we can just kind of clear the local state. We can also have the form in the Vuex, although I don't think that's that important. And we reset at the end. Again, this is not too streamlined. If we do kick this off asynchronously and reset, what might happen is we could actually reset before submitting this. So this is not something that we want to do, okay? Let's go ahead into create trick, and we're probably, as I was talking about batch requests and transactions, we'll probably not actually be able to do it because the submission will need the trick ID. So we need to create the trick before we create the submission. This could be passed as one request, and the whole creation of the trick could be handled in the trick controller, or we can create it asynchronously, but that's just the nature of the beast. We just want to get this up and working first and then think about the problems that can occur with this. Okay, so let's go ahead and just create the trick same as we did before, and we'll just say create a trick. And what we want to do then is surface the submission that we are passing here. So if I go back here, this submission, I mean, let's copy the name, right? Double check that you get the spelling, right? Once we got that, let's go ahead and say submissions here. We want to go ahead and submit the submission, and we can say created submission. All right. Now, before we actually submit our submission, what we want to do is grab the submission, say trick ID, and one thing, because I want to say I know so many languages. No, because I keep forgetting stuff. Okay, so let's say if I have an object A, this is how I usually test stuff. I go to the console, right? So I can make this a little bit larger. If I have object A, can I just grab a property like B and say that it's a string? Is this going to be an error? Can I go ahead and set it again, and can I just access it, right? And if I just output the object, you can see that it has actually created the property B on here. Same as you can kind of say, create me a property C, and let's say lol on here, right? And if I, again, output A, this object kind of grows dynamically, so it's not statically typed, right? So yeah, this is just two ways that I'm currently reminding myself that I can do this in JavaScript, okay? So just saying basically trick ID, go ahead and grab my created trick and grab the ID from here, okay? Can't decide between using semicolons or not. I think this will be fine. So in case, just one thing, because some people don't know, when you create the trick, once we submit the trick, we don't have an ID. So when we add the trick and when we trigger save changes async, that is when the trick gets saved to the database and the ID gets assigned to it. So by the time that we return this from the controller, the ID will be there, okay? So we do not need to do another fetch again. We just have the ID generated once we actually create this, right? So let's go ahead and try this, right? There is no, I'm a little bit lost. So, okay, so we're in the video uploads. Because I want to be able to see the submissions for this trick as well, let's go ahead and create a store. So JS submissions, all right? We'll go to tricks. We'll just copy everything. We'll say this submissions, and here we'll just say submissions. For now, again, it's just a dumb way to grab this, okay, or dumb way to save this. So this is probably not a real use case. It could probably be like a discover feed on Instagram or something like that, but at this point it doesn't really matter, right? So we get the tricks. Instead here it will be submissions, and again this is submissions, 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 and the last thing is the fetch. So let's go ahead and replace the tricks here. Let's just make sure we don't have tricks anywhere in here hiding. So once we have the tricks, let's go submissions, let's go ahead into our index.js, and we will dispatch submissions, fetch submissions. Oh, and yeah, one thing I was talking about, you see how if I press enter, it's basically saying just put it in here. If I press tab, it's gonna replace everything else in there, okay? So here we're gonna fetch this. Let's go ahead and open the index page. We can go ahead and turn this into an object. Put this back here, map the state, put the dots, make sure we decompile, deconstruct, and I never remember the words. Yeah, and what we want to do is essentially just see all the submissions that we have, right? So let's just make sure that we're grabbing this from submissions, and whoop, submissions. So this will no longer be this. This will be submissions, because the submission should have the video. All right. And then we just want to say, right, if this is submissions, and this will be description. we then want the same for tricks, right? There won't be a video here, there will just be names. So we will kind of see all the tricks first and then all the submissions. So first thing, I'm going to create a trick and then a submission, and then there's going to be a question of how do you select the trick for the submission that you're making, right? But maybe we'll be able to cheat a little bit. Let's go ahead and actually say ID here then, okay? So we'll maybe be able to cheat, right? Just for this video. So, okay, before we one-shot this, let's go ahead and give this a Control F5. So we'll say uploads. We'll say we want to upload a trick. So let's go ahead and say awesome trick, right? We'll save the trick. We'll say we want an upload of this, and we'll just say that this is some combo. And then we'll save the submission, and then we'll save the review. And hopefully, again, this has failed because I am not meant to be calling it like this from a nested module. This is a way that you call from the root module. So let's go ahead and fix it, right? We want to be calling it as a root. So if we go into video uploads, we will do, if we go back to index, let's just grab both of these commands. And video uploads. So it's kind of basically what we're doing is, it's not like a directory structure where we are inside video uploads and we just want to go back up. It's like if you're 5 levels down, you just want to say that you want to be navigating from root. So the way you do this is you just say root true, right? So this is the stuff that's written in the docs, and hopefully this should work, right? So let's clear this. I'll zoom out a little bit on this and I will give this a refresh. So awesome, some combo, nice. And ID is 1. So let's go ahead and botch this up a little bit. On the video upload, what we'll do is we'll just say ID, and again I'll just say that I want an ID, and we'll just say 1. Let's actually just say 1, that we are going to be uploading this for a video with an ID of 1. Say this ID, and I actually realized that this is not going to work because let's get rid of this. What's going to happen, there is a fundamental problem in our video upload, because when we say save trick, we are first saving the trick and then we're setting the ID. So we want to be able to skip this step. Let's go ahead and put this here. What we want to do now is we want to access the state of the store, because the state is where we store the type. So what kind of upload type is this? Here we want to access the type, and we want to say, is this a, upload type trick, right? So are we uploading a trick? If yes, upload the trick first and then assign the ID. Otherwise, assume that the ID is going to be present. So I probably shouldn't have deleted all this stuff. I'm just gonna go ahead and cheat anyway here. I'm just gonna say ID is 1 now, alright? And we can go ahead and actually maybe prove this on the index page. Let's say SID, so the ID of the submission is itself. And then we will say S trick ID, okay? And if you're wondering about the entity framework core relationships, don't yet. This again, it's too far at this point, okay? So again, let's give this a good refresh. Upload, submission, select a file, another one, and another combo. Save submission, review, error occurred, and silly Billy me. Yeah, so when we set the ID, so if we go back here, right, I guess you can notice, probably like sometimes when I watch tutorials, I can see the person making the mistake before, but again, this is something hard to catch on to. So this is meant to be a trick ID, right? So because we have a submission, ID will be set automatically. Trick ID is something we want to supply, and specifically because we said 1, submission with ID 1 already exists, so that just added to the trouble. Let's go ahead and refresh this, and give this another go, right? So let's do this again. Another combo, save submission, save. And there we go, right? So let's say the interesting thing here is that the ID set for this submission is 0. So let me go ahead and check what is wrong. And I don't actually know, right? So this is going to be a little bit of a live debugging session. Let's go ahead and log the created trick. And so this is updated. And let's just say anything here. Go ahead and reselect. Yes, okay, so there's a little bit of bad saving there as well. And let's go ahead and save here. So, all right. So the primary mistake here is that we don't have a $sign here, right? So we are getting the full response here. This is what I was talking about, the full response. So you see we get the configuration. So I guess I can quickly explain it here, right? Configuration, if you want to retry the request, configuration for Nuxtjs, this is the part where you can just grab this config as this object, just put it into Nuxtjs and it will redo the request. Data is our data. When we put the $sign, we just grab this bit. Headers are the headers, right? We get status text, and the request itself, the request that we've made. Okay, and that's pretty much the quick breakdown for that. Let's go ahead and give this another refresh. Again, we'll just make sure that this is not a problem anymore. Say something like that, right? Okay, and that's good. So the third submission that we've made for a trick again had it 0, and the fourth submission had a trick of, or had the trick of ID of 3, which is correct. So this will be it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comment section. Don't forget to check the description for all the good information. Slowly starting to bring all the stuff together with the models in the database. And by the way, I'm working towards securing a Linode Cloud credit for you guys, so you will be able to use it for free, more or less, up until a point, right? But nevertheless, ending the video here. Again, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in my other episodes.